So this is Charles. I wanted to share some techniques that I use to put together what I think is a relevant talk on a Sunday feast to first-time comers. And Prabhupada started the Sunday feast to introduce people to Krishna consciousness. I think long talks, detailed talks, talks peppered with lots of scriptural quotes in the original verses are for during the week when devotees gathered together to study more deeply the philosophy. But Sunday feast talks are meant to be specific. I believe that the best talks are those that take an aspect and focus on it narrowly. People don't come for the first time to hear our philosophy from A to Z. A good talk will be one that focuses on a narrow topic and discusses it, delves into it thoroughly. It should involve stories. It should involve humor. It should be relevant. It should be topical. You know that you've reached your audience when, after the talk, some of the feedback is that, how did you know I was going through that very thing in my life right now? Or someone says, I really needed to hear that today. Someone else might say, how did you know that I was going to be here today? This is what I'm dealing with right now in my life. Those comments mean that you are making Krishna consciousness relevant to them in the place where they are now. Those kind of comments mean that you talk to them rather than talk over them. Now, talks should be introduced by their topic. You should introduce the topic with the theme. You should not introduce a Sunday feast talk by citing a verse. The talk should not be verse-based. They should be theme-based. Now, in order to promote your theme, you bring in verses from our scriptures. There's no reason why you can't bring in relevant verses from other scriptures as well, like the Bible. Bring in psychology, bring in statistical analysis, bring in stories. Be careful not to bring in a story just because it's a good story. Make sure that your story is going to illustrate the point that you're making. Have the topics be relevant and pertinent to what people are going through in their lives. Here are a few sample topics alphabetically. Actions speak louder than words. Amazing grace, answering the call. Art of waiting. Battlefield of the mind, beating the odds, becoming a hero of faith. Being a gatekeeper, be a light, be an example, better together, be a person of excellence, blessing your future, bringing life to light, bringing dreams to pass, burning brightly, choose faith over fear, calm in crisis, calling in comfort. Consistency is the key, change the channel, consciousness is contagious, confront and control, curing loneliness, created to overcome. So you get the idea there. I always prepare my talks in advance. I never give a talk off the top of my head. I do this for two reasons. Preparing your talk gives respect to your audience. They had so many optional things they could have done, but they chose to come to your temple, and I'm honoring that, and I'm respecting that by giving them the best message that I could possibly get. And secondly, by preparing your talk and giving a professional delivery, you're indicating that you feel this is important enough to spend some time rehearsing it and preparing it so that it will have the greatest chance of bringing about a change of direction in the lives of your audiences. Now, I never give a talk without a PowerPoint. In my case, it's a keynote because I work on Macintosh. This is what people are used to in the classroom, in seminars or workshops that they go to. They're always PowerPoints. People are looking at Facebook videos. They're looking at Instagram videos. They're looking at YouTube videos. This is how people are conditioned. So I always have PowerPoints to illustrate my talks. I use Google Images. I look at the text, which is going to be underneath the image, and I brainstorm what would be the best type of image that would resonate with this text. And then I do the Google search, and I always look for large images because I don't want it to be all blurry and pixelated when it's thrown up onto a big screen. It's a good chance to throw in a lot of pictures of Krishna, if for no other reason, as well as being something that people are conditioned and used to. When you do a slideshow, it engages an extra sense. It engages the visual sense. Our whole philosophy is about mana shastrindriyani, engaging the six senses, including the mind. So if you can engage another sense in addition to the oral sense, then why in the world wouldn't you take the time to do that? Now, when I'm putting a talk together, I take the theme and I search that theme throughout all of Google. I look for synonyms, words that mean the same thing as the word that I'm searching. I look for antonyms. What I'm doing is I'm just trolling through a lot of information. I'm putting down notes. I'm picking up anything that sticks. I pick it up. Then I go to the database and I do the same thing. Now, Prabhupada uses words quite differently. You won't do this for very long without realizing that Prabhupada uses words quite differently. I might want to prepare a talk about having a passion for Krishna consciousness, but when you search the database, all of passion is never a positive word for Prabhupada. It's always passionate ignorance. So keeping in mind that Prabhupada generally uses words differently than us, and when he uses a word, he uses it very consistently and very specifically. He won't use the same word very often to mean two different things. So that's just a heads up in there. So I search through the whole database, and I have a special attention for stories. Stories from the Mahabharata, stories from Narayan, or stories from Prabhupada's own lifetime, which will illustrate the point. Like, for instance, activating your faith. Prabhupada leaving Vrindavan, putting on the line, going across the ocean with no money. He had faith, obviously. A lot of people have faith. But how many people activate their faith by actually putting themselves and their future in the hands of God in a life or death situation? So that's when faith really, really activates and goes to the next level. So I put these search terms into Google, into the database. Now, here's another tip. I subscribe to a couple of services. eSermons is the best one, my favorite one. There's also Sermon Central. They cost like $99 a year. And they're full of sermons. Unfortunately, there aren't any ISKCON sermons in there. It would be a great service if someone did index the ISKCON preachers, but that's not in existence at the time. But again, you go into the sermons. You can search under illustration if you're just looking for an illustration of what you're trying to present. You can look for humorous examples of what you're trying to present, or you can just go through sermons. And the sermons will come up to you, and the phrases that you're looking for, like activate your faith, will jump out at you. Now, these subscription services are, again, a great way for you to familiarize yourself with your topic, because you're seeing how different preachers, and most of them are world class, are taking different angles, approaching the same subject from different angles. You're going to come across some great stories. You're going to come across some humor. All that's available through these different services. Now, in a half an hour talk, I like to have a minimum of 3 stories. And there are 4 types of stories. There are stories from the Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's one type. There are Prabhupada stories, all that Prabhupada overcame in order to be successful. Those are really good. There are personal stories. You have a story about an instance when you overcame your reluctance. You got out of your comfort zone. You did something that you wouldn't normally do for Krishna. You bestirred yourself, and Krishna reciprocated with you in some dramatic or non-dramatic way. Obviously, the template we use is leaving the comfort of the Los Angeles temple, going to Utah where there are no devotees, very small Indian community, no constituency, leaving the surety and the predictability and the stability of a well-established temple, going to an area that's 90% another religion trying to start a temple. Well, as you can see from the image behind me, that worked out pretty well. Krishna supported us. Krishna showed up and showed out in our lives. So that's your personal instances. And it doesn't have to be something as dramatic as going to another state and breaking ground. But if you think about it, there are many, many instances where you stepped out of your comfort zone. You agreed to accept some inconvenience in the interest of honoring Krishna, and then Krishna gave a sign that he approved that. Those stories are the best of all stories. And then from those above mentioned subscription services, they're a gold mine. They're a gold mine for stories. contemporary stories, not ancient stories, not stories packed up in a lot of exotic cultural trappings, but stories about people we know, contemporaries, situations that are familiar to us in this day. Those are very, 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 very good stories. So in a half an hour talk, I like to have 3 stories. You can only talk theoretically for so long before you start to lose the attention of your audience. You look out, people are starting to nod off, they're checking their cell phone, they're looking in another direction. You know when that's happening, it's time for a story, okay? Now I mentioned 30 minutes. I don't believe that any talk should be more than 30 minutes. I believe the talk should be narrowly focused, leave them wanting more. Don't try and lay out everything for them in one session. They're just coming to get a taste of Krishna consciousness, to check you out. They haven't bought into anything at all. And in that regard, it's okay to quote Sanskrit in the original once or twice to show your bona fides, but if you quote it in a half an hour talk repeatedly, it may seem like you're just showing off. Now, I generally, when I finish the talk, I don't take questions because I have in-depth examined a certain theme, a certain point. I like to tell people I'm trying to make a soul tattoo. So the reason I don't open up for questions is that I'm afraid someone's just going to come out of left field and ask something totally unrelated. I like to leave the audience with an afterglow, so to speak. They've gone very, very deeply into a topic, and with any luck, they're going to be meditating on that for the rest of the evening, throughout the feast, and even when they get home. So I don't want to have some loose cannon ask a question out of left field, which is going to spoil the mood. But I do offer to people during the announcements, I'm going to go downstairs. We serve out the feast, and people sit at tables, 6 to 7 people at a table. So I go to each and every table, and I ask people, do you have any questions? And I tick through the census. Do you have any questions? Anything you saw, anything you tasted, anything you smelled, anything you touched, or anything you heard? And that's when we really get into the philosophy and get into the Q&A. If I was going to take questions and answers, I would still limit the overall session to 30 minutes. I would make my talk shorter, and then I would allow the balance of that 30 minutes time for questions. So this is just how I prepare a talk. And let me tell you about one other eccentricity I have in giving a talk. I do not sit on the Vyasasana. I stand behind a podium. Now, this is what Westerners are much more used to. It's what they're much more comfortable with. And I personally feel that I can be bigger than life by walking around. I can act out certain roles in certain dramas. I feel that gives me more freedom to be a representative of Krishna, to do what I'm good at doing. But again, that's a matter of personal choice. Many of the new devotees who are less than three-year devotees, some of them initiated, some of them not initiated, I ask them to step up. They've seen my example. They see the standard I set. And so every other week in the Salt Lake City Temple, the new devotees are asked to give a talk. And generally speaking, I don't tell them they have to stand up. I don't tell them they have to do a slideshow. But generally, they follow me. They like to stand at the podium. They like to illustrate their talks with a slideshow. So this is what I do to make the maximum impact on a first-time audience and to increase the liability of their coming back, maybe with some friends the next time. And I'm very happy to see that the next generation of devotees in Salt Lake City are following in this very, very same path. And that means that they basically agree with what they've seen, and when they're called to step up to the plate, they pretty much do it the same way. But again, this is just Caru, putting it out there for your consideration. Thank you. I am available at utahkrishnas@gmail.com. I'm 75 years old. I don't know how much longer I have. So I would much rather share whatever I have. I would much rather answer the questions of preachers who have 20, 30, 40 years ahead of them, because theirs is the future and not mine. So I'm going to put my email out there, utahkrishnas@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you want to get into more of the nitty-gritty, I will be only too happy to make myself available. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.